This is Jim Fong, except that's not his real name. His real name was Kwok Wah Bao. He was 17 years old when he got here. He'd spent 3 weeks on a steamship crossing the Pacific. He'd spent every day of that crossing memorizing a 200-page book, the layout of a village he's never lived in, the floor plan of a house he'd never slept in, and the names of brothers he'd never met. Because if the inspectors asked him a question and he got it wrong, if he hesitated even for 1 second, they'd put him back on a ship to China 2 years after he'd left with nothing. This is Angel Island. It sits in the middle of San Francisco Bay. From certain angles, it looks like a resort. Eucalyptus trees, hiking trails, Golden Gate views. You can book a campsite here now, rent a kayak, or get a cup of coffee at the cafe. But if you would have stepped off the ferry here back in 1930, you would have seen guard towers, barbed wire, and armed soldiers. Because this wasn't a resort, it was a prison. But between 1910 and 1940, 175,000 people didn't come here for the kayaking. Today, you pull up to a modern dock. There's a state park visitor center, families with kids, couples on day trips. It's honestly a great place to spend an afternoon. And then you walk 100 yards and you'll see this. A 2-story wooden building surrounded by barbed wire. Inside, triple bunks packed into rooms meant for half as many people. Interrogation rooms, dining halls where men ate in silence, wondering if they would ever get out. These are the ones who came through. Their photos are still hanging in the barracks. Some look terrified, some look defiant, most just look tired. The thing you have to understand, and nobody really explained this to me before I came here, is that Angel Island wasn't like Ellis Island. Ellis Island took hours. You get processed, you got checked for diseases, and if you passed, you walked out the front door into New York. Angel Island took weeks, months, sometimes even years. And it wasn't random. It was designed that way especially for one group of people. In 1929, a teenager named Jim Fong boarded a steamship called the President McKinley in Hong Kong. He was traveling alone. He carried a single piece of luggage and 200-page book that his father had bought from a family in his village. The book contained everything you could possibly know about a house you were supposed to have grown up in. How many steps from the front door to the well? Which direction the door faced? Where your mother, a woman you'd never met, kept the rice bucket? How many windows in each room? Who lived in the third house on your left? Jim's job during the 3-week crossing was to memorize all of it, every page, every detail, until it felt like memory instead of study. Because Jim was a paper son. A paper son was someone who entered America using fake documents, papers that claimed you were the child of an American citizen. Your father or your uncle or someone from your village would buy citizenship papers from a family that had legal status. The papers said you were their blood relative, born in America, returning home after a visit to China. The papers cost money, a lot of money. Jim's claimed age on the papers was 15, 2 years younger than his real age. His father paid roughly $100 per year of claimed age, so about $1,500. In 1927, that was more than most Chinese villagers earned in their entire lives. When the ship docked in San Francisco, they put Jim on a ferry to Angel Island, and for the next 3 weeks, interrogation inspectors tried to break his story. How many windows are in your home? Which room did you sleep in? What direction does your front door face? Where's the rice bucket kept in your kitchen? Who lives in the third house on your left? How many steps from your door to the village well? These aren't trivia, they're traps. A real son, someone who actually grew up in that house, answers without thinking. A paper son has to translate the memorized page into real memory. And any hesitation, any stutter, any glance in the wrong direction, the inspectors would catch it. And the kicker is, they've already interrogated Jim's alleged father and his alleged brother, separately, weeks apart. If their answers didn't match, if one of them said the rice bucket was in the east corner and Jim said the west, all three of them could be deported, and the father who'd saved his whole life to buy these papers would lose everything. Jim was in the barracks for 3 weeks, waiting, wondering. Every day it was the same. Eat, wait, worry. Next day, eat, wait, worry again. The walls around him were covered in poems carved by men who had been waiting longer than him. Some of them had been there for months. One guy, they locked him up for nearly 2 years. The inspectors wrote in their official report that Jim bore a marked resemblance to his alleged brother. He looked more like his paper family than his real one, and that probably saved him. On July 27, 1929, 3 weeks after he arrived, they opened the gate and Jim Fong, Kwok Wa Bao, walked off Angel Island speaking no English. He worked as a fruit picker, then a dishwasher, then a cook, then a waiter, then a cashier, then a manager. Eventually, he owned the restaurant. He sent money back to China for decades, sponsoring his 2 real brothers to come over, also as paper sons, using the same system that had nearly kept him out. He lived under a fake name until the 1960s, when amnesty let him change his surname back to Kwok. And here's something I didn't know until I got here. The detention center, the building with the barbed wire and the triple bunks, has no view of San Francisco. You can't see the city from there. The Golden Gate, the skyline, the promise of America, it's all on the other side of the island. The detainees couldn't see it. They were less than a mile from San Francisco and they couldn't see it. Now here's the thing about the Chinese Exclusion Act, and I'm going to try to say this without sounding like a textbook because this actually matters. The Exclusion Act wasn't just a law, it was a message. It said you can work here, you can build our railroads, and they did, thousands of them, through the Sierra Nevada in winter. They said you can die in our mines, you can cook our food and wash our clothes, but you can't belong here. You can't bring your wife, you can't send for your children, and you can't become a citizen. And Angel Island was the enforcement mechanism, the gate. If you were Chinese and you wanted into America, you had to get through this building first. And they made sure most people didn't. We all know Ellis Island. Give me your tired, your poor, your huddled masses yearning to breathe free. That poem is on the Statue of Liberty. Every American kid learns it in school. Angel Island has poems too, but they're not on a statue. They're carved into the walls of the detention barracks by men who didn't know if they'd ever get out. Nobody taught me about Angel Island in school. I'm retired and I've lived in California most of my life, and I didn't even know this place existed until a few years ago. That's not an accident. We remember Ellis Island because it tells a story we like about ourselves. Angel Island tells a different story, and I think that's why most people have never heard of it. Jim Fong got out in 3 weeks. He was one of the lucky ones. But some detainees waited months, some waited years. They couldn't send letters home, so they carved poems into the walls. Imprisoned in this wooden building day after day. My freedom withheld. How can I bear to talk about it? I look to see who is happy, but they only sit quietly. I'm anxious and depressed and cannot fall asleep. The days are long and the bottle constantly empty. My sad mood, even so, is not dispelled. Nights are long and the pillow's cold. Who can pity my loneliness? After experiencing such loneliness and sorrow, why not just return home and learn how to plow the fields? Jim Fong never had to carve a poem. He was out in 3 weeks. But some of these men were locked in this building for months, some for over a year. They couldn't leave, they couldn't send word home, they couldn't work, they couldn't do anything except wait and carve poems into the walls. About 175,000 people were processed through Angel Island. Most of them were eventually admitted, but thousands were deported. Sent back to China after months of waiting with nothing, in shame, and some of them left behind nothing except these poems you're looking at right now. The detention center closed in 1940. A fire damaged the building. The poems sat there for decades, forgotten, peeling, covered in paint. Nobody thought to preserve them, but nobody wanted to remember this part of the story. A park ranger found them in 1970. He recognized what they were, and thanks to him, they're still here. Jim Fong died in 1991. He was 79 years old. He never talked much about Angel Island, not to his kids, not to anyone. His son didn't learn the full story until after Jim was gone. I think about that a lot, the things people carry, the stories they don't tell, and the ones they carved into the walls hoping someday someone would read. The barracks are empty now. The interrogations stopped 80 some odd years ago. People come here now to hike and picnic and rent kayaks, and that's fine. It's a beautiful place. It should be enjoyed. But if you walk into that building, past the cafe and the visitor center and the families with their kids, and you stand in front of those walls and read those poems, it's hard to feel the same way about this country. And I think that's a good thing. Well, alrighty then. Let's get back on the road and check out some new stuff. Thanks for watching, everybody.